Imagine your phone pings. A dead friend asks, "Miss me?" Everyone in the group chat dies by Chilton helps you find trust, spot digital lies, and stay interesting to friends. Watch my summary and read it now.
You can feel it in the soles of your shoes long before you ever consciously register the sound.
Right, it's like this deep, bone-shaking vibration.
Exactly. It begins in the earth beneath the Crowhurst Business Park, just creeping up through the foundational concrete, shuddering through those cracked, linoleum-covered floorboards of the ground level.
And then it just settles squarely in the marrow of your bones. It's rhythmic, unforgiving.
Yeah.
A heavy mechanical heartbeat buried in the subterranean basement of this brutalist monolith. A building that, honestly, the majority of this decaying town has simply forgotten exists.
And then as you descend those concrete stairs into the dark, the smell hits you. It is a physical wall.
Oh, the sharp, metallic tang of fresh industrial black ink.
It catches right in the back of your throat. Bitter, cold. It mingles with the heavy, suffocating odor of damp newsprint.
Thousands upon thousands of reams of paper just sitting there.
Trapped in locked, airless archive rooms for decades, slowly returning to pulp.
The air down there feels thick, viscous. You breathe it in, and it genuinely feels as though the stagnant history of an entire community is settling heavily into your lungs.
And the noise builds with every single step you take downward. It's no longer just a vibration in your jawline. It is a hypnotic, deafening clatter.
The massive green printing press.
This industrial behemoth from a bygone era when local news was the undisputed lifeblood of a community, it is roaring to life, giant metal cylinders spinning with terrifying velocity.
Dragging these endless, screaming reels of paper through their iron jaws. The sheer, unadulterated violence of the machinery is overwhelming.
You look at those winders, those massive steel rollers, and you realize instantly that if you were to slip,
If you were to fall into that mechanism,
the machine wouldn't even register the resistance of human bone. It would simply fold you into the broadsheet.
and standing above it all, suspended on a flimsy, rusted metal staircase that overlooks the spinning cylinders, is Trevor.
Mild-mannered Trevor.
Right, the incredibly average, seemingly exhausted editor of the Crowhurst Gazette. The man who drinks weak PG tips, leaves half-eaten digestive biscuits on his desk, and complains softly about the deteriorating work ethic of the youth.
Only he is not wearing his usual unironed pale blue shirt. He isn't wearing his scuffed corduroys.
No, he is wearing a nightmare.
A costume ripped straight from the darkest corners of local folklore, black, synthetic feathers, matted with age and dust, completely covering his shoulders.
And a grotesque, oversized papier-mâché crow head rests on his shoulders.
Yeah.
It has these dull, shiny glass eyes that seem to just absorb the harsh, flickering fluorescent light of the basement.
And a long, jagged beak. He is Jackdaw, the thorny crow, a quaint symbol of village tradition twisted into something profoundly evil.
In his right hand, he holds a ceremonial trowel.
The heavy metal edge catches the light. It is unnaturally sharp. And looking closely at the blade, you can see the imperfections in the steel.
You can see that it has been used.
And beneath the deafening, rhythmic roar of the printing press, beneath the terrifying visage of the thorny crow, Trevor speaks.
He doesn't scream.
No, his voice isn't manic. It isn't unhinged or breathless or theatrical.
It is terrifyingly calm.
He simply admits to it. Standing there in the dark, he casually admits to slipping into a rundown caravan down by the river 30 years ago.
He admits to framing a poor Polish immigrant named Peter Doyle.
He admits to pushing a man off a 500-foot cliff into the Black Ocean. He admits to orchestrating a bloodbath, butchering innocent teenagers at the Craw Fair.
All just to boost his newspaper circulation numbers.
He deliberately manufactured a bogeyman.
Yeah.
He slaughtered his own neighbors.
Because the town was boring. Because the high street was dying. Because he needed a sensational, bloody headline to save his own legacy.
And now, 30 years later, holding that sharpened trowel, looking down at his latest victim, he's perfectly ready to do it again.
Welcome to our deep dive.
Today, we are pulling you down into the murky, claustrophobic, brilliantly constructed world of L.M. Chilton's voice.
Everyone in the group chat dies.
You are stepping directly into a dual timeline nightmare.
You'll find yourself suspended constantly between the blinding, over-chlorinated artificial sun of a Magaluf holiday resort and the depressing, gray, terminal decay of a British town called Crowhurst.
We are going to completely dissect the terrifying psychology of WhatsApp chat logs, the socio-economic rot of the modern high street, and the absolute moral decay of a group of desperate flatmates who ironically call themselves the Deadbeats.
We are going to examine the very anatomy of a modern thriller. But it's vital to establish right now that we are looking at this primary text from two fundamentally opposed vantage points.
I look at this narrative and I see a chilling, undeniable indictment of a generation.
I see a cast of characters entirely devoid of a moral compass, engaging in what can only be described as sociopathic behavior, all thinly veiled under the excuse of economic desperation. I see a villain whose grand plan, frankly, teeters dangerously on the edge of utter melodrama.
And I look at this exact same text and I see something profoundly different. I look at Kirby, our highly flawed protagonist, and the desperate, shocking actions of her friends in Flat 4, and I see survival, pure and simple.
Survival.
Yes, I see the emotional core of an entire generation that has been systematically locked out of their own future, trapped in gig economy hellscapes, grasping at the aesthetics of true crime fascination, simply because it is the only place left where they feel any semblance of agency.
Well, we will follow the evidence. We will see which interpretation holds under scrutiny. But to do that, we have to anchor ourselves in the environment.
We just described the visceral, tactile horror of that printing press in the climax, the sheer scale of Trevor's violence.
But the true, insidious horror of Chilton's novel doesn't actually begin in a blood-soaked basement. It begins in the suffocating, inescapable banality of a dying town.
Crowhurst, nestled deep in the fictional Braglan Fells, a town whose absolute greatest claim to fame is a 30-year-old unsolved murder and a high street that is slowly turning to dust.
It is crucial to understand how Chilton is playing with you as a reader here. This is not your classic British cozy mystery.
Oh, absolutely not. There is no Miss Marple sipping Darjeeling tea in a quaint cottage with a beautifully maintained thatched roof.
Chilton completely subverts that entire genre. We are dealing with something we should probably classify as social media slacker noir.
Slacker noir, I love
The
that.
terminology is incredibly precise when you break down the mechanics of the genre.
How so?
Well, the traditional cozy mystery relied entirely on the promise of the restoration of order. A disruption, a murder occurs in an otherwise perfect idyllic community. The brilliant detective arrives, solves the crime, removes the bad apple, and the moral universe of the village is righted. Order is restored.
But Crowhurst has no moral universe to write.
Exactly. The town is already dead. The disruption isn't the murder. The disruption is the realization that no one actually cares.
It's twinned with a landfill. Literally. Someone graffitied "twin with Packington landfill" directly under the welcoming sign at the edge of town, and no one has ever bothered to clean it off because it feels too accurate.
When Kirby walks down the high street in the 12 months ago timeline, she counts boarded up shop after boarded up shop.
The only places clinging to a miserable existence are a pub that perpetually smells of stale beer and unwashed bodies, a greasy late-night food truck called the Grillenium Falcon, and a place called Fast Forward.
Fast Forward is perhaps the most perfect architectural symbol of this town's arrested development.
It used to be an independent video rental shop in the early 2000s.
When the world digitized and moved on, the owner, Vinny, simply repurposed it as a cafe. But he didn't renovate. He didn't adapt.
He just left all the faded, sun-bleached DVD and VHS cases sitting on the shelves.
He kept the life-size, peeling cardboard cutout of Vin Diesel standing by the door. The past is literally crowding out the present.
They are serving tuna-heavy, supposedly veggie food options while surrounded by the decaying plastic of obsolete media. It is a monument to stagnation.
And think about Dylan, the brooding, exhausted chef who lives in Flat 4 with Kirby.
His entire dream is to save Fast Forward. He wants to buy it, gut it, and turn it into a modern suburban brasserie called the Rookery.
He works these grueling, soul-crushing shifts at the Red Lion pub, literally just reheating ASDA frozen shepherd's pies in a microwave for apathetic locals, trying to save enough pennies to build something beautiful in a town that actively, aggressively resists beauty.
Which makes the ultimate fate of their building, Stuart Heights, so devastatingly ironic. By the end of the text, we learn that this crumbling ex-council flat with its mysterious, ever-growing ceiling cracks and its permanently dodgy boiler is covered in scaffolding.
It's not being turned into the Rookery. It's being turned into a Pret Manger.
The ultimate, inescapable symbol of homogenized corporate high street sterilization.
The quirky, desperate human decay of Crowhurst isn't saved. It is simply paved over by a multinational chain coffee shop.
It's a tragic reflection of the real-world decline of the British high street. The independent spaces, however flawed, however sticky the floors are, represent a community.
And when they're erased, the opportunity for upward mobility is erased with them.
And that specific erasure of opportunity is exactly what breeds the profound apathy we see in our protagonist, Kirby, which pulls us from the damp gray of Crowhurst directly into the blinding artificial neon of Magaluf.
The present-day timeline.
Right. Kirby is 30 years old, fishing half-empty beer cans and floating plasters out of a hotel swimming pool, working for a company called Sunkissed and Single Holidays.
Wearing a bright orange 100% polyester baseball cap.
Emblazoned with the slogan, "Hot mess and doing my best."
We really need to pause and examine this hat. We need to dissect this uniform for a considerable amount of time because it is the defining philosophical text for Kirby's entire character and, frankly, a damning indictment of the phenomenon of millennial burnout.
It really is.
Put yourself in her shoes. She is 30 years old. She is physically cleaning sun-baked vomit from underneath cheap plastic sun loungers.
She is hiding from a horrific, unspeakable trauma back in the UK.
And her chosen shield against the reality of the world is a corporate-mandated slogan that actively celebrates her own dysfunction.
But it's not just a corporate shield, it is a deeply, painfully relatable defense mechanism.
You find it relatable?
Yes, because Kirby is hyper-aware that she hasn't met society's milestones. She is living in a crumbling flat share. Her bank account is constantly pirouetting around her overdraft limit.
She drives a beat-up car that is still covered in the vinyl logos of a Foxton's estate agent because she literally cannot afford a 200-pound paint job.
Exactly. She embraces this clumsy goofball persona. Chilton describes her as a mix of Emma Stone and Jessie the cowgirl from Toy Story on a particularly bad hair day because there's a twisted logic to it.
Which is?
If she owns the failure, if she brands herself as a mess, then the world can't use her failure against her. It's preemptive self-deprecation as body armor.
I find that interpretation incredibly generous and perhaps dangerously validating.
Why dangerously validating?
When you look closely at Kirby's behavior in the flat share, this clumsy goofball routine completely crosses the line into weaponized incompetence. She relies entirely on her flatmates to feed her. She nearly burns the communal kitchen down attempting to make scrambled eggs.
She's overwhelmed.
She relies on this hot mess narrative as a perpetual cop-out. It is an active, conscious avoidance of adulthood, an active avoidance of accountability. She might wear the hat, ironically, but the irony is just a thin, protective layer of plastic over genuine laziness.
Are we just ignoring the trauma of her professional failure? She was essentially forced out of her previous journalism job in London.
Because of a viral mistake.
A huge mistake.
Yeah.
She wrote an article for a digital outlet called News Bites. It went viral for all the wrong reasons. She made the fatal mistake of trying to argue with internet trolls in the comments section, got the entire company into a precarious legal situation, and was unceremoniously fired.
So she retreats.
She retreated to Crowhurst because the Gazette was literally the only publication left on Earth that would hire her. She is paralyzed by the terror of trying and failing again on a public stage. That is exactly why she clings to the hot mess identity.
But is that an excuse?
In the modern gig economy, it is psychologically safer to not try at all than to try your hardest and be publicly destroyed for it.
And yet, when she arrives at the claustrophobic offices of the Crowhurst Gazette, her editor, Trevor, offers her a clear path out of that exact apathy. He presents her with a mantra, a phrase that forms the absolute spine of this entire narrative.
There are no shortcuts to the truth.
Let us examine the mechanics of this phrase in its initial context. When Trevor first delivers this line to Kirby, he is aggressively lecturing her about her journalistic ethics.
He is presenting himself as the ultimate image of old-school, noble integrity. He despises internet clickbait.
He visibly cringes at the digital obsession with page views, engagement metrics, and likes. He looks Kirby in the eye and tells her that a story is only ever as trustworthy as the person doing the reporting.
He positions himself as the stoic guardian of objective reality in a world drowning in misinformation.
And it sounds so grounded, it sounds so pure.
While Kirby is obsessing over SEO optimization and desperately checking page retention rates, Trevor is sitting there, drinking his weak tea, insisting that the local paper has a sacred duty to celebrate, champion, and serve the town.
We stick to the facts, he says. It establishes this incredible, almost paternal mentor-mentee dynamic where you, the reader, genuinely believe Trevor is trying to pull Kirby out of her slacker noir malaise and teach her the value of hard work.
Which is exactly what makes the tragic irony of his character reveal so breathtakingly cynical later on.
There are no shortcuts to the truth. We will return to this phrase. We will turn it over again. Because the way Chilton warps this supposedly noble sentiment into a twisted justification for mass murder is the true genius of the plot's architecture.
But the macro setting of a dying town, as depressing as it is just the canvas. Chilton doesn't let us linger in the open air of the high street for long.
No, he forces us into a micro setting, a claustrophobic, entirely digital environment that every single person listening to this right now is intimately familiar with and completely trapped by.
The group chat.
The mechanics of how Chilton builds dread in this novel are masterful, specifically because he weaponizes the mundane. He utilizes the dual timeline perfectly.
The present-day narrative, where Kirby is baking under the oppressive Mediterranean sun in Magaluf, is constantly haunted by the events of 12 months ago in Crowhurst.
And the connective tissue, the bridge between these two disparate timelines, is a simple WhatsApp notification.
You know the feeling. You feel it in your pocket. A sudden buzz, a screen lighting up in a dark room.
For Kirby, it lights up the inside of her canvas plimsoll, resting by the pool like a, quote, shit disco.
She paddles her ridiculous plastic inflatable unicorn over to the edge, picks up her phone, opens an ancient muted group chat called the Deadbeats, and she sees a new message.
Esmey, miss me.
3 words, just 3 words. But the visceral, paralyzing terror they evoke is absolute.
Because Esmey Goodwin died 12 months ago.
The group chat effectively becomes a metronome of dread.
Think about the psychological weight we assign to digital notifications. In our daily, waking lives, a notification is a dopamine hit. It is a validation of existence, a connection.
But Chilton turns the underlying architecture of WhatsApp, the typing indicator, the read receipts, the specific phrasing of the left the chat notification into finely tuned instruments of psychological torture.
Think about the last time you saw those 3 little typing dots appear, disappear, and reappear in the middle of a tense argument. That knot in your stomach, that spike of adrenaline.
Chilton takes that universal digital anxiety and pushes it to its absolute fatal extreme. A simple mute or a left the chat notification literally becomes a death sentence in this book.
When Trevor, who has stolen Esmey's phone and is pretending to be her, starts systematically removing members from the Deadbeats chat as he physically hunts them down in the basement.
It is horrifying. You are watching your closest friends being erased digitally the exact moment they are erased physically.
It raises a vital, unavoidable question about our digital permanence. When Esmey goes missing, she leaves behind a massive, highly curated trail of content.
Her physical absence in the real world is entirely masked by her immense digital presence.
The architecture of the group chat allows a ghost to speak. It allows a murderer to wear the digital skin of his victim and manipulate her friends.
Are we all just one push away from being a headline? Are we all just one misstep away from becoming content for someone else's true crime podcast obsession?
To understand how easily a human being is reduced to mere content, we have to look closely at Esmey Goodwin. And there is no better sequence in the entire novel to illustrate the stark, jarring contrast between Esmey's heavily curated digital reality and Kirby's methy physical existence than the scene at the Millennium Falcon.
Oh, this scene is brilliant. We have to sit with this scene. It is past midnight. Kirby is incredibly drunk on a horrific, vile cocktail the pub affectionately calls Black Death.
A mixture of cheap vodka and dark soy sauce.
Revolting. She is leaning heavily against the filthy metal side of a food truck on a dark, completely empty high street, ordering a greasy, dripping kebab and a tragic bean burger she doesn't even want.
And standing right next to her is Esmey.
Esmey, dressed head to toe in pristine and possibly clean designer athleisure wear.
Carrying her signature salmon pink baguette bag, staring at the burger van as if the vehicle itself had just deposited a pile of fresh excrement directly onto her shoes.
Kirby, in her drunken state, desperately tries to make a human connection. She tries to make conversation, mumbling some profound drunken nonsense like, cows don't grow on trees, right?
And Esmey doesn't even register the attempt. She is utterly detached from the physical reality of Crowhurst.
She takes one tiny, dainty bite of the bean burger, purely for the aesthetic, and immediately pulls out her phone and starts framing the empty street for her followers.
She points her camera at a set of miserable roadworks, at the cheap red and white plastic tape fluttering sadly in the night breeze.
She casually calls it B-roll footage to set the scene.
Do you see what she is doing? She is already fictionalizing the physical space they occupy. She is building a narrative for her. show me followers out of the town's poverty.
And then the surreal climax of this entirely mundane interaction, Esmey spots a muddy, dangerous pothole in the road, and she literally pulls Kirby into it.
She forces Kirby to physically fall into the dirt, ruining her clothes, scraping her knees, bleeding onto the tarmac, just to create a viral, clumsy moment for the camera.
She tells her, "You have to be part of the story, Kirby. It's the only way to make people listen."
It is clout chasing, operating at its most visceral, abusive level. The physical reality of Kirby bleeding in a pothole is entirely subservient to the digital reality of the Show Me video Esmey is recording.
The pain is real, but its only value is how it looks on a screen.
It is a ruthless, calculated manipulation, and it forces us to dive deeply into the divergent psychology of these two central women. They are operating in the exact same digital ecosystem, but they're doing so from completely different psychological deficits.
Let's unpack Kirby's imposter syndrome first, because you genuinely cannot understand Kirby's passivity without understanding the monumental shadow of her father, Jason Dangerfield.
The washed-up, desperately tragic actor.
Famous entirely for a series of national toilet tissue commercials in the 1990s.
Braver, stronger, smarter. That was the slogan. He would say it with a knowing wink to the camera as he disappeared behind a bathroom door, clutching a violently large roll of Lucky Buns toilet paper.
Just imagine for a second the deep psychological trauma of going to secondary school with that exact image as your family legacy.
It's awful.
But the horror goes so much deeper than just mild embarrassment. Jason Dangerfield stole that phrase from Kirby's mother.
You did what?
It was an intimate phrase her mother used to whisper to her at bedtime when she was afraid of the dark. "You are braver than you believe."
Wow.
Jason took that. He commodified his daughter's deepest, most private emotional comfort and sold it to an advertising agency to peddle two-ply toilet tissue.
It is the ultimate unforgivable betrayal of privacy for profit. Look at the psychological fallout. No wonder Kirby is consumed by imposter syndrome.
Exactly.
Her entire identity, her core foundational memories, were literally converted into a punchline for public consumption before she even had a chance to understand them. She enters adulthood feeling like an absolute fraud because the foundational text of her childhood was exposed as a cheap marketing gimmick.
So what does she do? She shrinks. She plays the clumsy goofball. She leans heavily into the hot mess because trying to actually be braver, trying to be stronger, or trying to be smarter feels like stepping onto a soundstage for a commercial she never auditioned for.
Contrast this profound, crippling insecurity with Esmey. Esmey adopts the online persona of Shomé Sherlock.
Now, Esmey has absolutely no formal training in investigation. She has no journalism degree. She has no grounding in forensic science, law, or logic.
Yet she operates with an absolute, unshakable, terrifying confidence.
Her entire philosophy is summarized in her catchphrase. The internet is the new crime scene. The truth is in the details.
She weaponizes parasocial relationships to a degree that is deeply unsettling. She uses an app called Show Me, which is essentially a fictionalized analog for TikTok on steroids, to create an entire army of followers.
She affectionately calls them the Watsons.
These are thousands of armchair detectives who blindly, aggressively follow her every directive. They don't just consume her content passively, they act on it in the real world. They act as a highly coordinated digital mob.
I have to completely push back on your framing here.
Why? They are a mob.
You keep calling it a mob, but I look at the phenomenon of the Watsons and I see a fascinating, powerful new form of community. Think about who these people are.
They're internet trolls.
No, these are marginalized people. These are people sitting alone in their bedrooms, disenfranchised, ignored by society, who suddenly feel like they have a genuine purpose. They are searching for the truth in a world where traditional authorities, like the useless Superintendent Morris, have consistently, historically lied to them.
That's a very romanticized view.
Kirby desperately wants to be part of something meaningful, and the Watsons, for a brief, shining moment, give her that intoxicating feeling of agency.
Agency. Are we genuinely defending their actions as agency?
I think we have to look at.
They are systematically harassing innocent people based entirely on the unverified, dramatic whims of a 21-year-old influencer. When Esmey stages her disappearance, the Watsons violently descend on the physical town of Crowhurst.
Well, yes. But
They dox innocent local business owners. They inundate the local police station with thousands of prank calls, tying up emergency lines. They are not seeking the truth. They are seeking entertainment. They are consuming a real, human tragedy as if it were an interactive Netflix series. And they demand a satisfying season finale.
But you are ignoring the fact that they actually forced the police to do their jobs. Superintendent Morris wasn't even going to file a basic missing persons report. He was going to write Esmey off as a runaway.
He was understaffed.
It was only until Kirby uploaded a Show Me video that mobilized the Watsons that the police were forced to act. The traditional institution failed completely, and the digital community stepped into the void.
And look exactly what that digital community and the pressure of maintaining that digital clout drives our supposed protagonists to do. This brings us to the absolute moral nadir of the text, the friction point that defines the true nature of the Deadbeats.
You mean the cliff? Staker Point.
Staker Point, 12 months ago, the inciting incident of the entire tragedy. Kirby bravely tracks Esmey through the storm to a dilapidated, abandoned caravan teetering on the edge of the cliff.
She bursts in expecting a rescue mission, only to discover that Esmey was never kidnapped.
She was never in any danger whatsoever. Esmey faked her entire disappearance, hiding out in luxury while Dave brought her fresh Pret a Manger sandwiches every afternoon, all just to artificially boost her Show Me follower count to secure a brand deal.
It is the ultimate cynical viral stunt.
Yes. But then in the ensuing heated argument on the edge of the precipice, Esmey slips. The rock gives way. It is a genuine, horrific accident.
She falls over the 500-foot cliff into the black water below.
Kirby, Dave, Dylan, and Simo run to the edge. They stand there in the pouring rain, staring down into the darkness. And what does Dave, the lovable, goofy flatmate, immediately suggest?
He suggests they cover it up.
He says, and I quote the underlying logic here because it is chilling, "Think about what this will do to Mum. First Peter, and now her son. Think about Lily. All the money they invested, they'll lose everything."
Yeah.
He proposes, with complete seriousness, that they leave Esmey's broken body at the bottom of a cliff to rot, simply so that Dylan doesn't lose his financial investment in the Rookery restaurant. It is the definition of sociopathic behavior.
Sociopathic? No, absolutely not.
How can you say that?
It is a tragic, horrifying, but completely understandable reflection of desperate economic reality. Look at the scales they are weighing this impossible decision on.
Human life versus a restaurant.
On one side of the scale, you have a wealthy, privileged, manipulative influencer who just faked a violent crime, emotionally tortured her own mother for views, and treated their struggling town like a disposable film set.
She's still a human being.
On the other side of the scale, you have Dylan, a working-class chef who has spent his entire adult life reheating frozen pies, saving every single agonizing penny to build a single fragile business just to support his severely disabled sister.
You cannot weigh the value of a human life against a restaurant investment. That is the complete collapse of morality.
In a dying town where poverty is a slow generational suffocation, people do exactly that. Dave knows exactly how the world works. He knows that if they report it, the media circus will instantly destroy Dylan.
But the truth...
The press will say they conspired with Esmey, they will say they murdered her, they will all go to jail, and Dylan's sister will be institutionalized. He is choosing the literal survival of his found family over the dignity of a girl who was actively, maliciously trying to exploit them. I'm not saying it is morally pure. I am saying it is profoundly, desperately, messily human.
It's the ultimate corruption. And it forces us, as we promised, to reevaluate Trevor's mantra for a second time. There are no shortcuts to the truth.
Let's look at this phrase now through the lens of the victim economy.
Okay.
Esmey fakes her disappearance for show me clout. She takes a massive, unethical shortcut to fame by commodifying her own fictionalized victimhood. She realizes that being a victim pays better than being talented.
Trevor watches this unfold, and he despises her for it. He views her as the absolute epitome of vapid digital narcissism.
Yet look at his actions. Trevor is doing the exact same thing on a massive structural scale.
He despises Esmey for faking a crime to gain digital followers, while he is literally physically murdering human beings to gain physical newspaper subscribers.
Esmey plays in the victim economy with fake digital stakes. Trevor plays in the victim economy with actual physical blood.
But he justifies it. He views his own violence as noble, as a sacrifice, because it serves the community via traditional print media, while he views her stunt as vulgar simply because it serves her ego via digital media. The psychological gymnastics, the hypocrisy is staggering.
It is staggering, which pulls us directly from the modern digital true crime obsession back into the physical, historical, blood-soaked crimes of Crowhurst. We have to talk about Peter Doyle.
The town's bogeyman.
Let's take a tangent into the history of how we categorize killers, because Chilton makes a very specific point about how words matter.
Early in the text, Kirby casually refers to Peter Doyle as a serial killer, and Trevor immediately corrects her. He points out that Doyle historically was labeled a spree killer.
The distinction is criminologically highly significant. A spree killer commits a series of murders in 2 or more locations with almost no time break, no psychological rest between the murders. It is a single explosion of violence.
A serial killer, however, operates over a much longer period, with distinct psychologically necessary cooling-off periods between the kills.
The Crowhurst massacre in 1996 was a single, contained, chaotic event of mass violence, a spree.
But Trevor doesn't just correct her for the sake of pedantic accuracy. He hates the term spree killer, because it doesn't sound sensational enough for print.
He tells Kirby that the tabloids desperately wanted a serial killer because the concept of a serial killer sells more papers.
A spree killer is an isolated tragedy. A serial killer is a continuing threat. A serial killer is a franchise.
And Trevor needs a franchise to save his paper. But to build a believable franchise, you need the perfect scapegoat. You need someone the town is already psychologically predisposed to hate. You need an outsider.
Enter Peter Doyle. 30 years ago, Peter was a poor Polish immigrant living in a run-down, freezing caravan down by the river edge.
The xenophobia and classism weaponized against Doyle by the town is palpable and deeply uncomfortable.
The town elders, the local police force, the everyday residents, they all universally despised him. And not for any acts of violence initially, for incredibly minor, poverty-driven misdemeanors.
Selling small amounts of pot to local teenagers, shoplifting bread, shouting profanities at the amateur dramatics club.
It's absurd when you look at the historical record in the book. The Gazette literally ran front-page headlines like, "Local menace terrorizes amateur dramatics club with profane outburst."
The man literally just shouted bollocks at a terrible out-of-tune performance of the Pirates of Penzance.
But in a closed, insular, dying community like Crowhurst, that minor social infraction is enough to make you public enemy number one.
He was an outsider, he spoke with an accent, he didn't have the proper documentation, he was visibly poor.
When Trevor needed someone to take the ultimate fall for the Crowhurst massacre he was planning, Peter Doyle was the absolute path of least resistance.
The police didn't even want to investigate any further because finding a body, anybody, and simply blaming the Polish immigrant was the easiest, politically safest way to close the case and protect the town's tourism industry.
It's sickening. And Trevor executes this master plan during the Crowhurst. We need to describe this specific event because Chilton leans incredibly heavily into British folk horror here.
The Crowhurst isn't just a village fete with bunting and jam sales. It feels like a deeply pagan, blood-soaked ritual.
They gather at the recreational ground as the sun sets. There are dilapidated bouncy castles and heavily raided coconut shies, yes, but there is also a deep, unsettling tradition at the core of the event.
The stoning of the crow.
They dress a local resident, usually someone who owes a favor or lost a bet, in a cheap, terrifying papier-mâché crow mask, black synthetic feathers, a grotesque snapping beak.
This is Jackdaw, the thorny crow, and they literally parade him through the town square while the residents cheerfully throw rotten grapes and small stones at him. It's a sanctioned mob.
In 1996, Trevor dons this exact costume. He uses the anonymity, the chaotic sanctioned violence of the mask to slaughter teenagers behind the beer tent with a ceremonial trowel.
The visual imagery is horrifying. The jarring juxtaposition of a cheap, comical village mascot committing unspeakable, intimate violence.
And the most tragic element of this entire historical narrative, the piece that completely breaks my heart, is Betty.
Dylan's mother.
Betty loved Peter Doyle, truly loved him, and she was pregnant with his child Dylan.
On the night of the murders, Trevor sneaks into Peter's caravan and plants the bloody jackdaw costume under the bed. He hides in the shadows and listens as Betty bursts in, hysterical, begging Peter to run away into the night.
She knows the town will blame him. She knows they won't care about evidence.
Peter flatly refuses. He tells her he will fight to prove his innocence. He will never, ever leave his unborn son.
And that profound, noble declaration of fatherhood is exactly why Trevor kills him.
Trevor doesn't kill Peter out of malice or hatred. He kills him because Peter's stubborn determination to clear his own name threatens Trevor's carefully constructed narrative.
Trevor forces him at gunpoint to the edge of Staker Point and pushes him off to silence him forever.
But Betty's subsequent silence is what is so complex. She knew. For 30 years, she knew Peter didn't jump. She knew he wasn't a monster. But she stayed completely silent.
She watched the town vilify the man she loved. She watched them turn the father of her child into a local bogeyman, and she said absolutely nothing. Why?
Because she was terrified that if the town ever found out Dylan was Peter Doyle's son, they would destroy Dylan too.
The sins of the father would be visited upon the son by a mob. She sacrificed the objective truth to protect her child from a community that was entirely built on the foundation of shared hatred.
Which brings us to our third and final reanalysis of Trevor's core concept. There are no shortcuts to the truth.
Trevor stands on that shaking metal staircase above the roaring printing press, the trowel dripping in his hand, and he finally tells Kirby exactly why he did it.
He says he killed those kids in 1996 for the lifeblood of the community.
He claims that before the murders, Crowhurst was a joke. The patron was bankrupt. The high street was dead.
But after the murders, tourism exploded. Morbid murder tourists flocked to the town to see where the thorny crow struck.
The Gazette sold out every single week covering the investigation. He literally says, in a strange way, Peter Doyle brought us all together.
He manufactured a bogeyman to save his own relevance. He is the ultimate, absolute hypocrite. His precious truth is completely fabricated violence.
I have to admit, I struggle immensely with Trevor's motive here. I find it stretches the bounds of literary credulity.
Really?
Yes. The idea that a boring, mild-mannered local newspaper editor would butcher teenagers simply to boost circulation and instill a sense of civic pride. It crosses the line from grounded thriller into grand theatrical melodrama. It feels less like a psychological profile and more like a comic book villain's monologue.
Are you joking? It is a chillingly, devastatingly accurate metaphor for the reality of sensationalist media.
It's a bit much.
Chilton is taking the old journalistic adage of if it bleeds, it leads to its absolute, literal, physical extreme. Trevor represents an entire sprawling industry that actively, financially benefits from the trauma of the exact communities it claims to serve.
But butchering kids.
When the town is peaceful, the paper dies. The media apparatus requires a monster to survive. Trevor isn't a comic book villain. He is the logical, inevitable conclusion of an attention economy that successfully monetizes fear.
The metaphor is incredibly heavy-handed.
But it works. It works perfectly because the entire book, from page 1, has been building to this exact physical confrontation between the old, violent gatekeepers of legacy media, represented by Trevor, and the apathetic, exhausted gig economy millennials, represented by Kirby.
Which brings us to the final verdict, the climax of the novel. The Fitbit metaphor.
Let's set the scene carefully. Bring the narrative full circle back to our opening hook in the basement.
Kirby is trapped on the metal platform. The massive green printing press is roaring beneath her. The vibrations are shaking her bones.
Trevor, wearing the horrific jackdaw mask, is slowly advancing on her, raising the sharpened trowel. She is backed entirely into a corner.
She cannot fight a man twice her size. She cannot outrun him on a narrow catwalk.
And what ultimately saves her? A piece of gamified consumer wellness technology.
Her Fitbit watch.
We have to trace the arc of this specific piece of technology because it is not just a prop. From the very beginning of the text, Kirby's Fitbit is established as a profound symbol of her personal failure.
It was a Christmas gift from her absent father, Jason Dangerfield. It arrived a week late in the post with no card.
She set a New Year's resolution to walk 10,000 steps a day, deciding that in her 30th year, she would finally live up to her potential and get her life together.
But she never ever hits the goal. Not once.
The watch sits tight on her wrist as a constant, digital, buzzing reminder of her inability to reach even a basic, arbitrary adult milestone. Her slacker nature is literally quantified and displayed back to her every single day.
She even deliberately programmed the watch to play the loudest, most annoying, high-pitched congratulatory chiptune song when she hits the goal, because she originally wanted the whole world to know she succeeded.
But the watch has remained silent for years.
Until she is standing in a concrete basement about to be violently murdered.
She realizes something crucial. Trevor has taken his earplugs out. To operate the massive printing press, he usually wears heavy industrial ear defenders because his hearing is incredibly sensitive to high frequencies.
But to monologue? To gloat over her impending death? He removed them. He wanted to hear her beg.
Kirby suddenly remembers a drunken moment in the pub with Dave. Dave the legend.
The man who wore a full, pristine replica football kit indoors every single day,
Yeah.
but hadn't actually kicked a physical football in over a decade.
Exactly. Dave, in his infinite slacker wisdom, had showed them all how to cheat the step count on the watch.
You don't actually have to go outside and walk. You just have to sit on the sofa and shake your wrist furiously. And the cheap accelerometer inside the watch registers the movement as a step.
So, facing imminent, violent death, Kirby weaponizes her own laziness. She glances down at her wrist. She's at 9,895 steps.
She starts shaking her hand, vigorously,
Mm-hmm.
desperately. 9,910.
9,911.
Trevor stops and looks at her in utter confusion.
Yeah.
He is raising a sharpened trowel to plunge it into her chest, and she is just standing there, aggressively waggling her wrist in the air like a maniac.
And then she hits 10,000.
The watch erupts. An excruciatingly loud, high-pitched, incredibly piercing, beeping song blasts directly into Trevor's hyposensitive, unprotected ear canals and the echoing concrete chamber.
The frequency is agonizing. He drops his grip on the trowel, clutches his head in absolute agony, and Kirby uses the opening to kick him backward.
Sending him straight over the railing and into the jaws of his own beloved printing press.
This is where I have to draw a hard, critical line. As a literary critic evaluating the structural integrity and tone of a slacker noir thriller, this Fitbit climax is simply a step too far.
A step too far. It is a goofy, clumsy deus ex machina that completely undercuts the incredible tension of the scene you just described. You have spent chapters building a terrifying environment, the roaring press, the folk horror mask, the claustrophobia, and you resolve the ultimate conflict with a woman shaking her wrist until a digital pedometer plays a happy tune.
Yes, because
It shatters the immersion entirely. It reduces what should be a tense psychological survival sequence into a slapstick punchline.
you are entirely missing the brilliance of the metaphor. It is the ultimate defining triumph of the millennial slacker.
Triumph.
Throughout the entire book, Trevor has constantly berated Kirby for taking shortcuts, for relying on modern technology, for not respecting the old ways of hard labor. He represents the boomer gatekeeper of legacy media, violently, physically demanding relevance in a world that has moved on.
And how does she finally defeat him?
She uses the very symbol of modern, gamified, performative wellness, and she cheats it.
She survives through a software glitch in a piece of consumer technology.
Yes. She uses a shortcut. Trevor looks her in the eye and tells her, there are no shortcuts to the truth. But Kirby realizes in that basement that the entire system is rigged. Trevor's truth was a bloody lie.
I suppose.
The institutions failed her, the economy failed her, the police failed her, so she embraces the shortcut. She weaponizes her own perceived incompetence. It is a thematic masterstroke. It essentially says, fine, I am a hot mess, I am not doing my best, I am cheating my step count, but I am still going to survive you.
It certainly cements Chilton's complete subversion of the genre expectations. The brilliant detective doesn't outsmart the villain with a brilliant deduction or a physical fight. She literally annoys him to death with a pedometer.
And then the final image. She hits the button, turns the massive printing press back on, and prints the truth. She prints her story, exposing Trevor, exposing the town's lies on Trevor's own beloved machine.
It is a definitive end to the immediate physical threat. But as we step back from the text, the broader, more insidious implications linger heavily. The town of Crowhurst survives the night. But what exactly is it surviving for?
That is the exact question we want you to mull over as we end this deep dive. Address the reality of the town's decay and the horrific realization that the printing press ran on literal blood. Think about the world outside your window.
What happens when the watchdogs of a community, the local newspapers, the institutions explicitly designed to protect us, become so incredibly desperate for their own survival that they have to invent the monsters they warn us about?
Consider the chilling, lasting reality of Peter Doyle. His innocence, ultimately proven in ink, doesn't undo the 30 years of community bonding that was built entirely on the shared, vitriolic hatred of him.
The town rallied around a lie. They found genuine unity and purpose in a scapegoat.
Does a community require a bogeyman to survive? When you finally strip away the jackdaw mask and the massive printing press grinds to a permanent halt?
Are we terrified of the monster hiding in the woods? Or are we secretly terrified of the deafening silence he leaves behind when he's gone?